Refrigerators, sofas, houses and animals. All this was washed ashore after the Russians blew up the Kakhovka dam. And if you think this footage was filmed somewhere in the Kherson region, you are wrong. This is Odessa region, almost 200 kilometers from the dam. This is a real scale of another Russian crime.
О, бачиш? Ото чей-то дом, блядь.
A rescue operation is underway in the Kherson region. Military, police, rescuers, volunteers, they save people and animals. The water level reached 5.5 meters. It is approximately like a two-story building.
На правобережжі підтоплено 27 населених пунктів. Попередньо від водної стихії постраждали 3329 будинків.
The International Criminal Court began to investigate the disruption of the Kakhovka Dam. Its representatives already visited the Kherson region. Meanwhile, the Security Service of Ukraine published the interception of a conversation between two Russians. One of them confesses to the other. It was Russian sabotage.
Так это наши сделали, это не их, это наши сделали.
Да что, наши? Говорили, что это хуй долбанули.
Там не долбанули, там это наша диверсионная группа, они хотели типа этой дамбой пугать. Пошло не по плану.
Everything went so badly that the water flooded the first line of Russian defense. As a result, thousands of mines and shells from their warehouses ended up in water. Some of them stayed in the Kherson region, but plenty of them were washed away straight to the Black Sea and the shores of Odessa region. Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence published a conversation between Russian soldier and his wife. He complains that the command did not warn soldiers about possible flooding. After all, no one expected anything else from the Russians.
Что так быстро вода поднялась, что вы даже шмотки собрать не успели?
Она вообще моментально подошла.
Потому что ты мне фотки скинул, там была лужа.
Лужа была. Но и всем сказали стоять на местах, мы стояли.
А лодки где взяли?
По домам искали, ходили.
Нифига себе.
Нашли, спаслись.
Потому что...
They did save themselves, but not all. Here and there, the bodies of Russian soldiers are being found on the banks of Dnipro River. And traditionally, the Kremlin is not going to find out why their people died. On May 30, a week before the dam was blown up, the Russian government banned the investigation of accidents at industrial and hydraulic facilities on the occupied territories until 2028. That is, none of the Russians will ever find out what actually happened. Instead, while the Russians are once again trying to hide their crimes, the Ukrainians have already found those likely to be responsible for another terrorist attack by the Kremlin. Open-source investigators from the Molfar organization say that the 205th Motorized Rifle Brigade of Russia may be involved in blowing up the Kakhovka Dam, and the order to detonate was probably given by Colonel General Oleg Makarevich. The Russians decided to flood the Kherson region because of fear of a Ukrainian offensive. This is the opinion of the former deputy commander of the US Navy, Seth Cropsey.
It is possible that Russia fell for the Ukrainian deception operation and now seeks to cover its left flank. This would indicate a certain degree of confusion in the Russian general staff. This would confirm, along with above evidence, that Russia is scared of the upcoming Ukrainian offensive and gives it a high chance of success.
And what will Russian propaganda say about this? They continue to cry about the Ukrainians blew up their own dam. Although when Skabeyeva, Simonyan or Solovyov are asked why, they don't have a single opinion. Alexander Lukashenko, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, decided to save Goebbels' understudies.
Вы, наверное, догадываетесь, кто взорвал Каховскую ГЭС. Говорят, на варе шапка горит. Кто первым об этом закричал и прочее. Понятно, что украинской стране надо было скрыть эти 3 дня контрнаступа.
Once again, Lukashenko believes that the Ukrainians blew up the HPP to hide their counteroffensive, the same one that could be partially carried through the currently flooded areas. Well, nothing new, no evidence, some empty accusations and statements about the Ukrainian attack. By the way, it was the Russians who started to talk about the Ukrainian counteroffensive first. The whole defense minister Sergei Shoigu decided to glorify the brilliant defense of the Russian army.
В результате двухчасового боя противник потерял 30 танков, 11 ПМП, до 350 личного состава. Таким образом, специально подготовленные резервные силы противника для осуществления этого прорыва своей задачи не выполнили.
Probably baths with deer blood do affect the brain, because no one ever understood where Shoigu got these figures, even the famous Austrian military analyst Tom Cooper.
Some say that Russians are widely exaggerating Ukrainian losses not only because Shoigu and Gerasimov are in need of good news for Putin, but also because they are in panic. No doubt the figures released by Shoigu cannot even be described as science fiction anymore. Hallucinations of a drunkard would be closer.
Also, the Russians showed photos and videos of several damaged Western tanks and APCs, and they are happy about it. Even Putin is happy.
Ни на одном из участков боевых действий украинские войска не достигли поставленных перед ними задач.
But for some reason, neither Putin nor Shoigu say anything about how the occupiers fled under the blows of the Ukrainians. They are silent about the breached defense lines and the destroyed flamethrower systems, which they were so proud of. And it's clear that this is an incomplete list. British intelligence noted that the Ukrainians broke through the first line of defense of the Russians and liberated several settlements in Zaporizhia region. The occupiers flee in disarray, blowing up their own minefields. They are trying to hide their losses. It is also reported that the occupiers are blowing up small dams, hoping to slow down the Ukrainian offensive. However, even the large Kakhovka dam bridge did not interrupt the start of the Ukrainian offensive. No one knows for sure what is happening in the south of Ukraine right now, but Russian elites are already worried. According to Bloomberg, some have already lost hope in Putin, although they avoid telling him about it openly. The Kremlin continues on trying to keep everything under control. In particular, the Ministry of Defense of Russia obliged all its volunteers to sign a contract with the army by July 1st. This also applies to PMC Wagner thugs, who recently captured a colonel of the Russian armed forces. The leader of the Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has already said that his fighters will not sign anything. And one more Russian terrorist, Igor Strelkov, has already managed to call such statements a military mutiny. The life of the Russians is hard not only in the south of Ukraine, but also in the Belgorod region of Russia, where something unknown is still happening. Some shelling, some civilian evacuations. Those who cheered of the deaths of Ukrainians are now beginning to think, was the war that Putin unleashed in the center of Europe necessary? There are more and more graves of occupiers who died in Ukraine in Russian cemeteries. And instead of sympathy, the authorities give their families tickets to the circus. This was done recently in the Tyumen region. Well, what a country, such are the consolations.